Hello everyone. We're continuing our glance, I guess you would say, at some Old Testament material. Last time we talked about the first 20 or so chapters of Genesis and took us through Abraham. One of the themes was God's choosing of certain people without clear expressions of why, and that continues especially in a I guess a more precise view, with a tendency in the rest of Genesis for God to pick the underdog somewhat, the youngest person. You see that with Isaac being chosen over Esau, with favor being shown to Joseph. We didn't do the Joseph story, but a lot of you know that one. And you'll see that later in the David story. We're not going to look at that one, but I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the David story. So again, God values people, or uses people that might not be picked initially. So kind of an important theme. And actually you see that with Moses in what we're going to look at today, because he's a stutterer, as I'm demonstrating for you, right? So when we pick it up, we're looking at about the first 14 chapters of Exodus. Because of a famine, the descendants of Abraham had gone down to Egypt. Joseph had already been sold into slavery in Egypt. And so Joseph, of course, if you know the story, had become a very prominent man. He was the right-hand man to Pharaoh. And so his family is welcomed. But it doesn't take long before the Hebrews are seen as problematic by the Egyptians. There seems to be jealousy. The Hebrews seem to have very prolific families, and I guess the kids don't die. That was always a problem back in the ancient world. You had a lot of infant mortality. And so the Egyptians start getting scared of them, put them into slavery. And in the first couple of first couple of chapters of Exodus, we see that the Egyptians are trying to kill all the males. And so that, of course, is a way to keep the people under control. And I guess eventually the whole race would die out. And again, in the meantime, they're being used as slaves. If we're dating this story, according to most figures I see, maybe around 1300. I'm, by the way, using, even though it says the New English Bible, I got this 1980, I guess, so it's not really very new. But it has a lot of good notes. And I've seen elsewhere that maybe Ramses II would be the Pharaoh who's the main player in this story a little bit later in that confrontation with Moses. There's not a lot of historical records, though, for this. And so, of course, a lot of people doubt the veracity of the story, or at least certainly a lot of the details. But anyway, I'll leave that up to you. And so the Hebrew midwives are a little bit sneaky, and they refuse to kill the boys, which of course is seen as being good by God, because we don't want to kill infants, and so even though they're a little bit duplicitous with the Egyptians, that's seen as being, I guess, necessary and good. There seems to be a little bit more allowance of deceit in these early stories than maybe you would see in the Psalms talking about, the importance of honesty and all that. So Moses, in particular, is saved, is left by his family at the Nile River. It's common with heroes to have a miraculous birth. That's one of the features of their heroic story that a lot of commentators have noted. Sargon, one of the king of Akkad, about 2300, there's a similar story about him being rescued from the river. Anyway, he's saved by Pharaoh's daughter, and Moses' sister is watching. Some of you might recall the Ten Commandments movie, and so gets his own mom to be the nurse, the wet nurse for Moses, and so he's really being kind of raised by mom, but also within the royal family. However, at some point, he seems to find out what his true identity is, because he's known to the Hebrews as being a Hebrew, and he takes their side, and or at least he takes their side. I can't remember actually. I might have misspoken on that. Whether they're known to him as a Hebrew. But anyway, he kills an Egyptian who is assaulting one of the Hebrews, and a little later, when Moses tries to intercede between a couple of the Hebrews who are fighting, one of them says, "Hey, you're going to kill us." And so Moses realizes that what he has done is known, and so he's afraid his cover is going to get blown. And so he leaves and goes out into the desert. In chapter 3, he meets up with the family of it's really in chapter 2 that he meets up with the family of Jethro. It's an all-girl shepherding group, and Moses helps them out on one occasion. They take him home, and he basically becomes part of the family. He marries the eldest daughter, and lives several years there. And during all that, we presume he might have had a quiet, prayerful life. It doesn't really say, I don't believe. But at some point, Moses is summoned by God himself. This is in chapter 3. The famous story, the burning bush, where this bush is burning, but it's not burning up. And so God calls to Moses. This is on Mount Horeb, by the way, which is generally associated with Mount Sinai. It's seen as two names for the same mountain. And so God tells Moses, "I've got a plan for you. I want you to rescue the people." And Moses, of course, is reluctant. For one thing, he does say, "I'm a stammerer. I can't do this." Seems to kind of want to stall God, and he says, "Well, what am I going to call you? What's your name?" And the name during this time, and you see this in Egyptian stories too. In our class we were talking about how Isis goes to great lengths to learn Ra, the sun god's real name. And so God does tell Moses his name, which in the King James Bible is translated as Jehovah, means something like "I am what I am," or "I will be what I will be." And so just stating the existence of God, his nature as pure being, I guess. And so Moses is told that he's going to deliver Israel, and Aaron will end up helping him Aaron is his older brother, and he's a little better talker. And in this Bible, they suggested some of these stories may have been compiled by the time that the Aaronic priesthood is in power, because they do give a lot of emphasis upon Aaron, and Aaron's descendants were the priests, the priestly class. And so anyway, Moses is given these signs that he'll be able to use. One is he turns his staff into a snake, although in the actual incident that follows, I believe it's Aaron does this. He's able to put his hand in his cloak and it comes out leprous, and then he puts it back and it's okay. And then he's also able to turn the Nile water into blood. The Egyptians saw the Nile as being a god, or there was a god of the Nile at least, so that the Nile was seen as being divine. And some of these subsequent plagues that we're going to see are probably addressed at some of the divinities. Mention one or two of those, okay? And so Moses does go. He sees Pharaoh. Of course, he's not well received. Pharaoh says, basically, who are you? Pharaoh, of course, would be extremely powerful. Egypt is really a mega power at this time. They, I don't think, really had any great enemies that they were likely to be defeated by. In a few centuries, they would suffer some defeats, but now they are large and in charge. And so Pharaoh's not going to listen to this. He doesn't want to lose his slaves, and he seems to know that Moses just asks, let's give us a few days, give us a long weekend, and we'll go out and worship. But Pharaoh presumably knows that that people will skedaddle as soon as they get out there. And so in this whole long story, Pharaoh is portrayed as being arrogant. He'll, on one occasion, he'll make a promise, okay, I'll let you go, and then he changes his mind. And so you have a long kind of drawn out story where I guess God is giving Pharaoh enough rope to hang himself, as they say. God will perform these 10 plagues, all designed to show Pharaoh what's what. Pharaoh resists. A few times it's mentioned that God actually causes Pharaoh to resist. That might just be another way of saying, Pharaoh was a jerk, and God had his hand in these matters. I don't think it would be appropriate to look at it as, Pharaoh was really a swell guy, and God, cast a spell on him to make him change his mind. I think God is just letting Pharaoh be his true self. That gets very difficult when you're talking about any of these ancient stories. In another one of my classes, we're reading the Aeneid, and Venus makes Dido fall in love with Aeneas, and she does some stupid things, at least in Virgil's mind. And so, if you could take the path of saying, oh, well, none of it's her fault because she had this spell cast on her. But I don't think Virgil lets her get away quite that easily, even though he's very sympathetic with her too. But I think Virgil feels that it's maybe just kind of a grand way of saying she was herself. The gods were involved, but she did what she wanted to do. So anyway, that's that is called overdeterminism. I believe E.R. Dodds talks about that in his book, The Greeks and the Irrational, a really famous book. Okay, and so no need to go through all those plagues. First one, I believe, is the water turning into blood. And then you have frogs all over the land, possibly a reference to the frog goddess Hecate. And you have maggots and flies and darkness. The darkness is the next to last one, I think. And locust boils, everything. And again, there's a little variety, but Pharaoh always hardens his heart, or God causes him to harden his heart. You have a lot of repetition. The story's kind of drawn out, but again, this is the style in these ancient stories. They took their time. They weren't interested in getting on social media. And they like the stories. They like the repetition. And so, finally, by the 10th labor, I said labor, I was about to make this Hercules here. The 10th plague, God has finally had enough, and he causes the death of the firstborn across the land. But for the Israelites, there's a way to save themselves, and that's the famous Passover. And the Passover, of course, became an important institution for the Jews. It was symbolic of the preparation for their exodus. Exodus means way out. It's a Greek word, the road out, ex and hodos, and so the emphasis is on being ready. If you're getting ready to go on a trip, you don't typically bake biscuits and make gravy and fry eggs and bacon before you get into the car. You might have some Pop-Tarts or something, and so, which I guess would be unleavened bread, right? And so they have a lamb who is sacrificed, and of course that becomes very important in Christianity. And they eat unleavened bread, which is faster, and some little salad, some herbs, and they prepare to leave. And so everything seems fine. They actually even get, they ask their Egyptian, I guess mostly owners, or anyway, the citizenry, to give jewelry to the women, I guess as a little bit of a payback for all that they had suffered. And so the children of Israel go out, fairly wealthy, and everything looks fine, but one final hardening of the heart is going to be when Pharaoh realizes, oh, I've been humiliated and I've lost my slaves. Let's go back and get them. And so he sends an army. And that, of course, is when you have this famous flood. They come to, there's some dispute about the body of water it is. The old tradition was the Red Sea, but there's also a sea of reeds. So anyway, they come to the water, and at first they think they're trapped. Moses is told by God to open the waterway. He holds up his staff, opens the waterway, and they're able to go through. It's perfectly dry. And then, of course, as the Egyptians try to follow them, Moses sends the water back, and it says every one of them is drowned. And so the children of Israel make it to out into the desert. The desert path is chosen for them, at least in one explanation here, because God thought they would not have the nerve for war at this point, which they will have to engage in when they go back to their original homeland, where Abraham was. There are other tribes there now, and so they can't just waltz in like they own the place. They're going to have to fight, and so they spend this period in the desert. And some of you probably know when they make it to the promised land, they're scared to go in, and so they have to spend a 40-year time period in the desert again. Basically, everybody who was alive when they came to the promised land has died. Not everybody, but most of them. And so it's a new generation, and they're maybe a little bit tougher, and they're going to have the faith. And they, of course, do successfully move in, although it's not just that they waltz in and take over. They do have to fight. That's in the book of Judges. Obviously, we're not dealing with anywhere near most of the Old Testament material here. This is just a little snippets. And so I think I did fail to mention on that Passover meal, when they kill the lamb, they're supposed to put some blood on the doorposts and the lintel as a sign to the death angel who's going through and killing all the Egyptians, including the firstborn of the cattle. So all the kids, even the slaves' kids, the cattle, firstborn of everything dies, but not in Egypt, because the blood is protecting them. And so, the lamb not only offers food, but offers protection, salvation, so to speak, which again obviously will be important in thinking in the New Testament. So that's it on the first part of Exodus.